Okay, testing. Am I on? Sean, am I on? Okay. Hi, everybody. Can you all hear me in the back? I didn't hear yes. Can you all hear me in the back? Okay. Am I too loud in the front? Yes. Okay. We'll try to moderate. First of all, the balcony has been open, so if we get a little crowded in here, there's space up in the balcony. Okay. Doors are on either side of the main door off the front lobby. Okay. So anybody want to get a seat that's almost there? Give you a couple more minutes. Okay, there's a few seats in the front. Going once, going twice. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started because we have a full schedule this evening. Welcome tonight, everyone, to the grand finale of the Building Blocks for a Successful Downtown. It's a program that's brought to you tonight by the Astoria Downtown Historic District Association. Tonight, we are pleased to offer you the findings and recommendations of a multi-month downtown revitalization project. Our speakers tonight are urban strategist Michele Reeves of Civilis Consultants and Sherry Stewart, Oregon Main Street Coordinator. I'm Susan Trabucco, and I'm emceeing this event tonight as my last official act as the chair of the Business Development Committee of the ADHDA. The BizDev Committee, as we call ourselves, has been responsible for shepherding this project over the last year and a half. Tomorrow I pass the baton to David Reed, and he comes in at an opportune time, which will be as we start the implementation phase of this project. David is the AFLAC manager for the area and has served on the Business Development Committee since its inception about 4 years ago. David has been a competent, capable, clever, crafty committee cohort who occasionally entertains his fellow committee members with alliteration in his emails. And I would not want to play Scrabble with him because he knows a lot of really big words that start with Q. So stay away. But David, where are you? Can you stand up and be recognized? Mr. David Reed. It's kind of dark back there, though, so I'm not sure you can really see him. I'll tell you a little bit more about how the Building Blocks program is working in a minute, but first I'd like to introduce the president of the Downtown Association, Dulcie Taylor.
Wow, thank you for that. Welcome. I want to thank you guys for coming tonight and welcome you. I have to say that Susan wrote me this whole long thing that I was supposed to thank people and all that stuff, but I'm going to cut to the chase and just thank the really important people, which are all you guys. But I would like to recognize our city councilors that are here, Arlene Lemire, Karen Mullen, Drew Herzig, and Russ War. Thank you for coming. We've got a lot of city officials here. Thank you. And then I want to acknowledge our sponsors, who are the Astoria Sunday Market, the City of Astoria, and Pacific, I always say Puget, but Pacific Power. And I want to thank Costco for donating our snacks outside, which was a big surprise to me, but very generous. Thank you. I'm going to do something that's kind of weird, but that's kind of how I roll. And I would like to introduce the BizDev Committee because they're the drivers of getting these events put on, coordinating Susan and all the members of that committee. So if the members of the BizDev Committee, and I could name you if you want me to, but could all the members of the BizDev Committee stand up? Susan, David, Kevin Leahy, Pat, Matt Stanley, Derek, Mitch Mitchum. Okay, if you guys could just stay standing, and if you could hold your applause for just a minute, because I got a weird thing I'm going on here. So could all the board members of the ADHDA please stand up? And I'm not going to say who you are, but you know who you are. LJ, Tiffany, Dareth. All my board members are here tonight. These lights are really horrible. It'll be like Jane Barnes on Saturday. So all you people keep standing, don't clap yet. And then could all my committee chairs and all my committee members please stand up? I know you're here. Pat, C, and Cynthia Merriman. There's committee members out there. I know you are. Some people up in the balcony up there. I just want you guys to see some of the people that are doing the work. working on the committees, working on the board, taking care of business for the ADHDA. I appreciate all the work that these people do. And now I would like you to give them a big round of applause. I want to thank Sherry and Michelle for all the work they've done in the last, I don't even know, is it 6, 8 months, a year? It's not a year, I know, but they, I love them both. They are very helpful and very informative, and I'm very excited to hear what they're going to say. So let me see. Do I have to say? Oh, thank you, Rebecca, for helping us put all these things together. And let me see. Oh, there is this little event I'm doing on Saturday as a fundraiser for the Downtown Association called the Jane Barnes Review. And could any of the guys that want to stand up that are in that event? There are a lot of gentlemen in this crowd that have dressed up for the Jane Barnes Review. Come on, be brave. Thank you very much, and that's Saturday. If you want a ticket, find me later. That's all. Thank you for coming.
She never does what I want her to do. Oh well, free spirit. Okay, so does downtown matter? And just what makes a successful downtown? Of course it includes economic prosperity for business and property owners. But to achieve economic success, a downtown must also be a place which visitors and locals want to shop, eat, play, and visit. So another measure of downtown success is whether it fosters social capital and community connections. Without a healthy downtown as a social connector, a community is, in a way, emotionally impoverished. That is one important reason that downtowns matter. Therefore, everyone who works, shops, eats, and plays in downtown Astoria is a stakeholder in its success. Businesses and organizations, both inside and outside the downtown area, need to attract and retain employees. They're stakeholders too. They have a vested interest in how downtown Astoria serves the needs of prospective employees, existing employees, and of course their spouses. So today Astoria enjoys many positive attributes. Its historic architecture and restored facades, many fine restaurants, shops, art galleries, the Liberty, Hotel Elliott, Commodore Hotel, and of course some very happening brew pubs. But downtown Astoria faces new challenges today, including an expanding retail corridor in Warrenton and the reality of our new economy. To learn how best to face the challenges, remove the barriers to success, and to leverage available assets, the ADHDA brought the Building Blocks program to Astoria for the benefit of all stakeholders. For those of you attending your first Building Blocks event, just giving you a quick rundown. We do have new people here tonight, and we're really grateful to have you here. So we don't want to leave you in the proverbial dark. We had a preliminary kind of get-to-know-each-other presentation by Michelle in mid-May of last year, so it was almost a year ago. And then we followed that ultimately when we gained the funding because of our economic development partners. We gained the funding to continue the full program. So then in November, we had a public kickoff session once we had funding in place. Since then, Michele Reeves has conducted extensive one-on-one interviews, research, and a block-by-block assessment of downtown Astoria in addition to other work. In January, Michelle led a group of folks on a tour of Portland's Mississippi district. We wanted to gain an understanding of the transformational stages that mixed-use districts go through. We also learned about the significant role that community connections play in a successful downtown or district. In February, Michelle led about 75 participants in an identity and marketing workshop. And tonight we're going to hear the results from that fast-paced session. And I wasn't going to bring this up, but I can't resist. I was moderating one of the small groups that night, and the word bipolar kept coming up to describe Astoria. And I just can't wait to see if it factors in tonight, although, you know, that puts pressure on Michelle to include it suddenly. No, it was pretty funny. But, you know, it resonated apparently with the whole group, so whatever that means. And then on a parallel track, throughout the Building Blocks program, Oregon Main Street Coordinator Sherry Stewart has been a collaborator with Michelle and the ADHDA. Through interviews and research, Sherry's role has been to gain an understanding of the organization's capacity. really essentially to carry out tonight's findings and recommendations, to assist the organization gain capacity where necessary, and to help implement those adopted changes that fall outside the ADHDA's authority. So this work provided by Sherry and her staff now and ongoing is really important assistance. We don't really want all this work that we've done to go for naught, and we don't want a plan that sits on a shelf. So we think this is very helpful. So let's get started. First up tonight is Sherry Stewart, who will talk about what she has learned from her capacity assessment process. And for a little background on Sherry, she is the state coordinator of the Oregon Main Street program administered by the State Historic Preservation Office. OMS helps communities throughout the state preserve and revitalize the economy, appearance, and image of their traditional business districts. She previously worked for the National Trust Main Street Center. She also served as executive director of the Port Townsend Main Street program. And most recently, Sherry was the assistant coordinator of the Washington State Main Street program. I am proud to present Sherry Stewart.
Well, thanks. Thanks for having me here tonight and to be able to present just a few of the findings from the capacity assessment that we were able to conduct as a companion piece to the work that Michele did. I figure I'm the warm-up act, and as all good warm-up acts, I'm only going to take a little bit of time to save the main stage feature performer the bulk of the time, and Dulcie just leaned over and whispered, said, "Now you only have 7 minutes." So, while I can speak fast, I'm only going to cover a few key points here. Again, the purpose of the program was really to look at how ADHDA is progressing in implementing the comprehensive Main Street approach. ADA, okay. The Downtown Association was accepted as our transforming downtown level community just a little over a year and a half ago, something like that. And they have really made tremendous progress in implementing this program that was adopted by the National Trust for Historic Preservation 30 years ago. Through the process, there was actually two of us. Along with me, I had the former assistant director of the National Main Street Center, Stephanie Redmond, who is a consultant and is now based here in Oregon, working with the statewide nonprofit Parks Association, along with me on the capacity assessment. We were trying to identify local perceptions, concerns, issues impacting the progress of implementing the Main Street approach and the downtown revitalization efforts. We also looked at areas where additional technical assistance from the Oregon Main Street program would be helpful in moving the Downtown Association along with their efforts. We were also looking at ways to build organizational capacity. Based upon the research that we did, here's a few quotes that I'll just put up and allow you to read as I'm talking about some of these key, well, there we go. Let's go back here. Let's get a few of these up here, because I think they're pretty, I don't know why it keeps jumping forward on that last one. We'll just leave these up here for right now. But one of the things that was universal, part of our process, we did a lot of phone interviews, we did some on-site interviews as well, way back in December. We asked for a list of people that were both involved and not involved, supportive, maybe not so supportive of downtown revitalization efforts, so that we could kind of get a 360-degree view of how people are feeling about the progress of downtown revitalization efforts. What we heard universally is that people are really excited about the leadership that is involved in downtown revitalization efforts with the association right now. The right people are in place in key positions in the organization, you know, there were just so many positive things that were being said about the downtown group and about the types of projects and activities that they were undertaking. The one thing, though, that really stuck out is there's all of that good, but as the critical listener of the statewide Main Street program, what I heard a lot of were they are doing this, they are doing that. And to me, a downtown association, as this group is trying to be in Astoria, represents the whole community. Everyone has a stake in what happens in downtown. To me, in the work that I've done in downtown revitalization for the past 23 years, is that downtown is the heart of a community. It's kind of the heart and soul, and if the heart isn't strong, then the rest of the community isn't as strong as it can be. Because of that, I feel everyone in a community, from the youngest child to the retirees in our community, has a role and a stake to play. Downtown business and property owners are key stakeholders in the community, but it's everyone in a community that makes a successful downtown. And so when I hear things too much like I want to figure out how can we make everyone feel that they're part of the downtown revitalization effort. How do we engage everyone in this room, as well as everyone in the community, in the work that they're doing? And I think that was great, lead into that particular message, to see who stood up and is actively, directly involved in downtown revitalization. Next time we do this kind of meeting, I want to see everybody standing up, that you're all involved in the downtown revitalization. So some of the observations, really quickly, and we give to Dulcie and the rest of the board a very extensive report, because the organizational capacity assessment isn't the sexiest piece of tonight's presentation. I'm not going through all of the recommendations, but I wanted to cover something that I feel is really important. I think ADHDA is really well underway to being a sustainable downtown management and historic preservation. You've had a long history in this community. It's kind of re-energized the past couple of years, I think really remobilized around implementing a Main Street program. And what we heard is that, again, there's strong and dynamic leadership in place. You have really achievement-oriented committees in place based upon the comprehensive Main Street approach of organization design, economic restructuring, and promotion. You have positive support from key partners like the Chamber of Commerce and the city, the Sunday Market. So many groups in town are really supportive of this effort. You have a diverse and committed board in place working on downtown revitalization efforts. There's a solid and expanding financial base for the program as well. The group is really being fiscally prudent and really kind of growing their nest egg, so to speak, to be able to sustain a long-term revitalization effort. Some of the key recommendations, and again, the report covers a lot of things really extensively. In terms of moving the organization forward and building and solidifying that organizational capacity to take on and continue to move forward with the good work that Michele has been doing, what needs to be in place to ensure that that happens. To continue to build and support the board, to continue to build and support the committees, and building and engaging volunteers. I feel that the organization is really at that critical point where you have a need to have a permanent executive director in place, a permanent staff person. The rare participants for the past couple of years have been phenomenal in helping the organization grow and build its capacity, but you're now at that tipping point where you really do need to have that permanent staff person in place. And okay, so I may be a little bit biased because that was me when I was in Port Townsend, so I do have a bias towards having that permanent staff person. But when I see where you're at and where some of our communities are at that have that permanent, I think you're right there. In terms of having that need, especially to be able to grow the scope of work that all of the committees will be working on and tackling as a result of this Building Blocks program that has been taking place over the past few years. There's always a need. Here in the Northwest, we have these evergreen needs, those things that are always present. So there's always a continuing need to grow that funding base and to grow the volunteer capacity, both at people and financial resources. The group has done a really good job with where they're at right now. It's going to continue to need to grow and have to fruition for this organization as well. Under the promotion, to continue to move forward with the revitalization efforts, one of the key things that we heard through the assessment process and through the interviews is that a lot of the business owners feel that the group has been doing a really good job with promotion and marketing, but they're feeling less and less engaged in some of the specific activities of which they should directly be benefiting from. So one of our key recommendations was really to hold a strategic session, kind of go through with business owners. Here's what we're doing, what do you like, what don't you like, what are some of those things that we need to tweak, what are some of your new ideas and fresh ideas, and again, really to engage business owners in the promotional and marketing aspect of activities. I think the group does a really good job with some of the key events that they're doing, not least of which is the one that's coming up this weekend, and one in fall, the Brew Cup, taking over those kinds of things. So I think those big events are really good. The group has good capacity. It's really that how do we engage the business owners? How do we build foot traffic in your downtown? And how do we connect more strongly with the residents, with the offerings that you have in downtown? We had a lot of specific recommendations in our report of some ideas for the promotion committee as they move forward. So we talked about, maybe doing some kind of club card for your local community, again, to make that a priority for this particular committee, or have you seen us lately? In some of our interviews, we actually heard that there are some people that haven't been downtown. And I'm sure that those of you who are downtown business owners, or those of you who do patronize downtown, you probably are having a hard time figuring that one out. I did when I was in Port Townsend, when I would run into people that had been downtown for the first time in like 10 years, and I'm like, good heavens, we're a small community at the end of the road. Where the heck have you been? And I'm sure you feel that way a little bit here in Astoria as well. So how do we connect those people? And so trying to, get them word out about all of the great things that you have, kind of look at your business clustering and the niches as you're moving forward, and really kind of strengthen those promotional. You also have a strong restaurant niche in the downtown, so there's a real opportunity of building something around that will enhance and promote and market that strong cluster as well. And then there's is a need to develop a stronger image or brand so that you're kind of unified in your message about what happens in the downtown. The next two areas, design and the business development, we actually didn't spend a whole lot of time in the report. We wanted to defer to the work that Michele is doing because she's really touching on this in many different ways. And so really, for these two areas in the report, we spent a lot of time focused on, especially in design, building the capacity of that particular committee so that they could grow and expand and kind of take a more targeted team approach to implementing recommendations. One of the things to continue, and you guys do a pretty good job with this, but to continue to do heritage-type activities that are focused on kids in particular, to engage young people in the downtown. There are futures in our community in many ways, so the more that we can touch and bring them involved in revitalization efforts and get them committed to downtown work, the better off and stronger we'll be as a community. In terms of business development recommendations, am I at my 7 minutes yet, Dulcie? A lot of the stuff that Michele will be talking about really falls within that. We saw a couple of needs to engage property owners stronger, doing a roundtable periodically. Maybe this could be quarterly to begin to really go through some of the recommendations that Michele will be providing, and really to continue to build the capacity of this committee. This is a very strong committee working for the Downtown Association, so to continue that momentum as they move forward. We're really kind of targeting some of those different groups. So we saw property owners and even a different type of opportunity. I know you do the monthly membership meetings, but maybe doing something special with just the business owners as well as they they move forward with their recommendations. So again, I promised to be short, talked really fast and covered a lot of ground. The report really has a lot more of those details, but the message that I want to leave for the Downtown Association and for the folks that are in this room, this is an amazing group of people. Again, I have worked with downtown communities extensively in my career, and the energy and involvement, the thoughtfulness, the leadership that's involved with the folks with this group is really, really special, and it's always good to have a reason to come out to Astoria. So I really appreciate their willingness to participate in this process. And I really, once again, want to encourage all of you, once you're here and be inspired by the message that Michele has, to get involved at whatever level that is comfortable for you, because this is a very special place, a very special community, and this is a great group to help you move forward with achieving your visions for downtown. So thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much, Sherry. That was wonderful, and I learned a lot, and I'm sure there's more you're going to tell behind the scenes. So thank you for not revealing all the dirty clothes. Okay, Michele is our next speaker tonight, Michele Reeves, and she, as you've heard, is an urban strategist. That's, I guess, all of our label. We like that. She has significant private sector experience revitalizing commercial districts. Her real estate background includes working with public and private partnerships, marketing unknown or undesirable districts, pre-development consulting, siting manufacturing facilities, strategizing with private sector investors on acquisitions and development projects, and also developing retail leasing strategies. Michele founded Civilis Consultants to assist cities with the revitalization of their mixed-use commercial districts and their downtowns by teaching stakeholders, that's an important word tonight, the building blocks of economically successful places. So tonight it is our turn. Tonight, Michele will talk to us about what she has learned through conversations, research, and observation over the last few months. And I think it's important for everybody to understand that much of what she'll impart tonight is what we, the community, told her. How we see downtown Astoria, how we like to see it, what we love about downtown, and what we think gets in the way of its success. And of course, she'll tell us how we can use this information to develop a more successful downtown. So ladies and gentlemen, let's hear what Michele Reeves has to talk to us about.
All right, I'm going to get all set up. Oh, wow, this really is like you're dark. I got to get this to the right size. Sherry and I are on the slides. I want to make it as big as possible. Okay, the thank you bandwagon. I want to say a big thank you to the ADHDA. They've been a joy to work with, and I actually want to mirror exactly what Sherry said, which was everyone should think about participating in this organization in some way that you can. They're really fantastic, and it has been just so much fun to collaborate with you guys. I want to say a huge thank you to all the sponsors who are up here on the screen, but a humongous thank you to everyone who's here and just the community. It has been a joy to work with all of you, and I've had so much fun. So that's the thanks. I'm getting through that kind of quickly as I want to do, and I am going to move on and talk to you about the 4 major areas that I'm going to cover today, and they're up there on the screen. I'm going to talk really quickly, just a quick review on some of the reasons I think downtowns are really important to the future of cities. I'm going to talk about how downtowns function, and I'm going to do that through the metaphor of a store, because a small downtown really operates like a single store. And then we're going to think about how to tell downtown's story more effectively, and then we're going to talk about policies for a winning downtown. So let's start on the importance of downtown, and we're going to begin by looking back. So post-World War II, the baby boom generation really reshaped our cities away from city cores toward the suburbs. But that trend is now reversing itself, and it's reversing itself very, very quickly, and we're going to continue to see that trend in the decades ahead. So let's look at some of the reasons why that's reversing. So Generation Y, which is 80 million strong, that is bigger than the post-war baby boom, they prefer to live in walkable places by a margin of 80%. Generation Y is connected, works, socializes, and shops using the internet, which is rapidly becoming more important than the car. In fact, the car is no longer the focal point of young people's first step towards adulthood and independence. As you can see by these stats, young people are not driving in record numbers. We are also seeing this shift economically. So for the first time in the history of the United States, more of our metropolitan core live in the suburbs than live in the center city. And that is a very new, like I said, first time. And then another reason that I think our walkable cores in our cities are really the places that are going to thrive in the future is that we don't have any money to pay for the roads that we have, to maintain them and to keep them up and running. So we really don't have money to pay to build lots of new infrastructure and lots of new expansion. So again, we're going to be doing a lot more of using what we have and much less of expanding and building new. So over the last few decades, what we've seen in city after city after city is that the most valuable real estate in that city has shifted to the cores, to the places that are most walkable. Those are your most valuable properties and your most valuable buildings. The places that are most attractive in terms of walkability are the places where we have infrastructure built right up to the sidewalk, right next to each other, hopefully historic, that's like a bonus, and have traditional street grids. Those are the places that are revitalizing and are in demand all around the country. And the cities that learn how to leverage and maximize these amenities are going to be the ones that are going to really thrive in the decades ahead. And Astoria is really well positioned for all of these trends. So that is a very quick overview of the millions of reasons why I think downtowns are important, but I just wanted to spend a couple of minutes just reviewing some of those things that we've talked about before. So what's up next is sort of this idea of how we talk about downtown in this holistic, big picture kind of way. And it's hard because downtowns are big and they have lots of moving parts, and how we get our arms around that is not always very easy. And so the way that I do it is by using this metaphor of downtown is really like a big store. And I use this metaphor because a successful store and a downtown should approach their businesses in much the same way. So a store, to attract customers, has to look pretty darn good from the outside, right? It has to pique your interest and drag you over to kind of take a look. And it has to be so interesting when you get close that you actually walk inside the store. You are drawn and compelled to go inside the store. And once you're there, you have to keep them in the store if you're good at what you do. You have to have great aisles that are easy to navigate. They need to be populated with fantastic products on fantastic displays. It needs to be a place of discovery where each thing you see in that store leads you to the next thing that you see in that store. All of these things are the things that make economically successful stores, and they're the same things that make economically successful downtowns. So we are going to take a tour of Downtown Store. And we're going to start by looking at these four parts of your store. We're going to start with front doors, but we're going to cover your front doors, your aisles, your fixtures, and your products. So we're going to start with front doors. How customers approach your store and what they see on the way colors their interpretations of your store even before they get there. For Astoria's Downtown Store, we're going to look, Astoria's store, it's downtown, has two entries, really. It has an east and a west front door. So it has two front doors, and I'm going to look at those. And I'm going to consider the journey to the front door, the mood that it's setting, and then I'm going to look at the front door itself, and we're going to look at how it's functioning mechanically. I'm going to do that by video. I actually took a video of your front doors. And I just want to say in advance that nobody can make fun of my driving. And if there are any public safety officers, there are no, tickets in arrears, because there are a few red lights that you might see in here that I'm sort of going through. So we're going to start. It's borderline. So we're going to start with Upper Town, the drive-through to the east. So when you drive through Upper Town as someone approaches Astoria, it's pretty nice in the two-lane section. You have trees and neighborhoods, peekaboo view of the river. But as the road widens to 3 lanes, the district starts to feel a little bit like a concrete jungle. This could really be almost anywhere USA, right? I mean, would anybody look at this and be like, oh, we're in Astoria? Of course, that's the Safeway. So you lose some of the identity there. And as we get closer to downtown, what starts to really dominate is parking. And you have fewer and fewer visual cues as you approach the downtown that you're about to come up to this really iconic and beautiful downtown place. So here we are at the front door. And if you notice, there's actually nothing to engage us. We're in the store now. We have gone through the door, and we are still have no sense that we're in downtown Astoria's store. And in fact, you don't even have anything that interacts with you on the sidewalk level as a driver or a walker until you get to this first light, which is sort of red. So I stopped right here. So your eastern front door, how is it operating as a front door? Right? It's invisible, right? There is no door there. Nobody really knows, like, okay, we're here. And what's kind of interesting is even after you go through the door, you don't even know you're in the store until you hit that first light. So that's a problem. So there are 2 thoughts that I had in the approach to this eastern front door. And the first one, and it's a little bit hard to see, I know, from the back. But the first thing that jumps out at me is standing just a little bit back from the front door. These were the first 3 things that I really saw, which are these big faces of buildings, particularly this one here on the left. So what about if you took those and you put some murals on those faces, or you did some dramatic lighting? Maybe you did both. This is an installation they have in downtown Vancouver, Washington. And that would be a way to show your customers who are approaching your front door that they're actually arriving somewhere and that you care about the experience they have as they're coming into your store. The second thing is, here we are kind of at the front door. You have this museum, which is fantastic, and it has absolutely zero interconnectivity with the downtown. So what is a way that you can link that up and have some stuff that's on the sidewalk? Because there are so many blanks as you go alongside here. And there's just empty parking and things that are inward facing and then absolutely nothing to the right. So one of the ideas that I had is, could you create and extend the theme of the Maritime Museum along the road with more outdoor displays? You could curate art, you could do a variety of things, you could have a lot of fun and do like embedded ships in a bottle in the sidewalk between downtown and the museum. What are some ways that you can extend that theme and that idea? You have this tremendous amenity to the downtown in a way that doesn't feel like it's all a blank and that there's nothing to pay attention to in the downtown. So those are some examples of things that I think that you guys should think about for your eastern front door. And now we're going to move on to your western front door. And your western front door has 2 different approaches, right? You can come in from 101 South or 101 North, which sounds confusing. But you can come across the bridge from Youngs Bay, or you can come across from Long Beach. So we're going to start by looking at people traveling on 101 North from Warrenton. So this journey from the west on 101 North is a little schizophrenic, I would say, Susan. The drive from Seaside all the way to Youngs Bay is really a celebration of all things arterial, and then all of a sudden, boom, you're out here in this estuary, and it's confusing, and you're like, wow. But it's absolutely beautiful, and you're treated to great views of the water, and you look off in the distance, and you see this town on this hill, and you think, wow, you know, that's pretty cool. It's very breathtaking. It sets a fantastic mood for visitors. But then you hit the roundabout, and it's confusing, okay? And I'm a fan of roundabouts from a traffic point of view, but it's very confusing. So nobody is now looking at anything, except for, am I going in the right direction? That is the only thing they're thinking of, and they do not see anything. And when they get out of the roundabout, this is what they see. They see a 4-lane highway with fast-moving traffic, no on-street parking, a place that is not very visually appealing, buildings with quite a bit of deferred maintenance. And they just keep going until they hit this light. And they're on a trip on 101, and they're confused because there's this ramp up to the bridge on the right, but there's a turn that you have to make to the left. So when we have these confusing moments, we stop looking around us, and we just are a little bit stressed. So they're sitting here at this light, and they're kind of not sure what to do. And they have to make this trip and look around and say, wow, do we need to explore Astoria anymore, or should we keep going? That's what they're asking themselves right here. So how are they answering that question? Yeah, keep going. That's right. My next video, I feel like a little amateur filmmaker. I'm just forcing you to watch my GoPro videos. So the next one is going to be traveling on 101 South. And it's actually got a lot of similarities. So you approach along the Columbia River on the Washington side of the border. It's absolutely beautifully, obviously. It's absolutely beautiful. It segues to this incredible trip across the Astoria. Do you say Megler? Is that how you say it? I've never said it. Which is just fantastic, and it really takes your breath away. I mean, it delivers an amazing feeling right to the heart to drive on this bridge. And again, you look off in the distance, and you're like, oh, look at that hillside with the little houses, and it's so cute, and great warm feeling. So that's fantastic. But as you get closer to town, the visuals around the bridge start to change, because they can't see anything that would really make you think this is a place that you want to stop and that you want to walk. And as you continue around the bridge, you get sort of whipped in this 360-degree circle. And at the bottom of that circle, you have to make a decision, especially if you hit the green light. Which way am I going? And there's a sign for 101. And then, hey, somebody said Astoria was cool. But again, they're going to get down to this light, and then they have to make a decision. And what decision are they going to make at this corner? They're going to stay on 101, most likely. So for the sake of studying our front doors, we're going to pretend that all these people turn toward downtown. And we're going to look at a video of what they see. So they continue on, and there are a few bright spots under the bridge in Uniontown, but most of it is empty lots, gas stations, some motels. It's not setting a great mood for people coming through town. And really, you're driving through here, and you just... is this Astoria yet? I mean, I really think people are thinking that. So finally, you do start to approach where it turns. And you're kind of like, oh, wow, there's some buildings up there, and they're close together, and this is a different kind of environment than the one that I've been driving through. Oh, my God, why am I going to the right? And what's going on? And these are kind of cool buildings, but I don't know why I'm driving here. And, oh, no, I'm going to have to go to the left now. I'm really confused. And again, they're not really taking in what's going on around your downtown. So that's your front door from the west. And really, it's just a super confusing front door, right? It's stressful. It's a stressful front door, which is not what you try and design in a storefront. So I want to rewind that a little bit and just talk about it and go through some recommendations. So first of all, Marine Drive to the west is really having a big impact on people's perception as they come into town. And I really think right-sizing Marine Drive so it's 3 lanes like the other side of town on the east side makes a lot of sense. You have room for some bike lanes. Thousands of people visit your city every year via bike. So you have room for some pedestrian islands so you don't feel like you're going to die if you walk on the sidewalk. Those things are good. Those things are good for your store. They set the stage. So I think part of helping this part of town change is the street needs to tell a different story. So definitely right-sizing Marine Drive. As we get closer to the front door, this is where we start to really notice that the topography is changing, okay? So this is where we start to notice. We're at the front door. And what is the first thing we notice? It's all beige! So we don't notice it, right? So it's a gray day. Look at all this. It all just blends together. I mean, you can hardly see it, okay? So, that's not good. So we round the corner, and what do we see? I got tired of drawing beige circles, so I just did one big beige circle, right? It's all beige. So that leads me to my next recommendation, which is one you hear me make a lot, which is use color, because if it's an exciting color, it feels like an exciting place. So this is your Mexican restaurant, your front door on the left, and this is a Mexican restaurant in downtown Milwaukee, Oregon. Which one would be a better front door? Yeah, the one on the right. This is what it used to look like. Well, like yours. Okay, so color makes a huge difference. Okay, so we're at that point where we're turning left again. We're super confused. We're pretty stressed out. We're kind of surprised all of a sudden we're in this downtown. One of the first things I noticed, what is this landscaping? You guys have a lot. This is just weird, right? So you've got these great buildings. I mean, these are really fantastic buildings on the right. They're government buildings, but you kind of get a sense like, please don't come over here, right? And there's like, I love this, there's like a cannon and then these giant trees. So it just makes me laugh every time I look at this picture. So it's not as bad as my favorite example of public sector landscaping, which is the Central Post Office in Portland. So it's not this bad, but it's pretty bad. So I think you guys need to work on some landscaping at that front door. And there's a lot you can do to make it be pretty darn impressive and successful on that corner. And then the other thing that I wanted to think about is this is really your gateway to commercial. And commercial is your marquee street, right? This is the sweet spot for downtown Astoria. This is where most of your identity is on commercial right now. And I don't actually normally recommend this, but you have such a confusing entryway into town, and there's so many things going on that you guys might want to think about something that suggests physically a little bit of a gateway. We're there! You're there! So I want to leave you with a little bit of a sobering thought about your front doors. So when we had that workshop that Susan referenced, one of the questions we asked is, what are the places that you avoid in town? So if you look at this list, you can see that it includes Marine Drive, which houses your two front doors. It lists Uniontown, which is one of the areas you have to drive through to get to your front door. And it lists the Flavel block, which is right inside your front door, and one of the first things that you see when you get into town. So your front doors are really important. So there aren't a lot of things right now that are working well about your front doors, and it's really hard to get people to come into a store when people don't like how it looks on the outside. So I just want to leave you with that thought. Okay, so front doors, check. We've talked about them. They're a little invisible. We're going to move on now to aisles. And that's the way people move around in your store. So in a store, aisles should be easy to navigate and understand, and there should be items of interest for people to interact with as they wander. So in a downtown, your streets and your sidewalks are your aisles, and they're really important to creating an economically performing place. If walkers do not feel comfortable and engaged on the sidewalk, and if drivers are easily confused about how to get around your store, they're going to leave your store and business will go down. So I'm sorry I've been a little sick, so I'm taking my Marco Rubio moment. So in downtown Astoria, I would say you have three aisles that we're going to cover here today, and that's your streets and your sidewalks and the Riverwalk, actually. And we're going to start with streets. So I love traditional downtown street grids and two-way traffic. And part of the reason for that is because it's really efficient. So if you're over here and you want to get over here, there's like a million different ways that you can do that. So that works really, really well. Another reason that these street grids are really effective in creating life and vibrancy is when you have a two-way street grid and people can kind of get around whatever, this block structure is ingenious because there's no back. Everything is a front on the block. And that's what creates a really livable, fantastic place to live. So in your downtown, you have a one-way street grid on all these, so it's super confusing to get from here to here. And if you want to have a debate with this room about the best place to get from here to here, I bet there are like 12 opinions on how to do that. And then you have this particular one-way animal called a couplet, where you take a high traffic volume place and you divide the traffic into two one-way streets. And couplets are particularly troublesome because they're designed to move traffic through quickly. And so you have your one-way street grid here that makes it hard to get around, and then you have this traffic here that's like, come on, move on through. And that's pretty difficult. So I want you to imagine you walk into Fred Meyer and they tell you you can walk down this aisle this way and that aisle that way, and this is for fast walkers and that's for slow walkers. And I know you see the Captain Crunch over there, but you can't go get it. You got to walk over there and around there and come. So how long would you stay in that Fred Meyer? Yeah, like 5 seconds, and you would never go back there again. That is what is happening in your downtown. Another detriment to the couplet is that it's creating a front and back to your blocks that shouldn't have a front and back. I can tell you, I don't think I've ever heard anybody say Duane Street. You know what they say? The back of commercial. It's not the back of commercial, it's the front of Duane Street. And the fact that you have that now is a problem in your downtown. And for Marine Drive, and we're going to talk about this later, Marine Drive is really the back of commercial in terms of how it feels, and I'm going to show you some pictures of that in a little bit. So unidirectional streets also have safety implications as well. So they increase the number of turns a driver has to take in order to get to their destination. So there are more conflict points for accidents. People driving on one-way streets pay less attention because they're kind of like a log flume, right? You don't feel like there's intersections. You just get on the log flume and you just shoot out the other end. You don't have to worry about it. And so when people don't worry about conflicts, accidents go up. One-way streets also encourage drivers to drive faster. So let's look at pedestrian fatalities based on traffic speed. If people are going 23 miles an hour and they hit a pedestrian, 10% likelihood of death. If they're going 42 miles an hour, 50% likelihood of death. Those are big numbers. So the speed people are traveling not only impacts livability in your downtown, but it also really impacts fatalities when you have that intersection between the two. I do want to make a note that imagine a store where you have to worry about dying when you're walking around the store. Is there an analogy for that? Like, you know, maybe at Home Depot, there's like a forklift will jump out and mow you down in the aisle. Like, there's no analogy for that in a store, and that's not good, right? Fear of death is bad for business. One-way grids also increase vehicle miles traveled, so gas prices go up because you have to drive roundabout routes to get where you're going. So can anybody guess what my first recommendation is? Yes, we want two-way streets in the street grid. So we want to convert as much back to two-way streets as we can. This is going to encourage exploration, make it safer and more comfortable, decrease frustration, and make downtown store easier to navigate. Downtown Vancouver, Washington, and downtown Oregon City did two-way street conversions recently on the last 2 years, and they've been totally delighted and happy with the results. Nobody wants to go back to the way that it was. I think that you guys need to think about for your streets. You have an old historic city. These are our most valuable places in the country, and they have unique infrastructure needs. You guys have chair walls. You have an old city. So I really think that it makes sense for the old cities to all get together and really lobby for specific historic infrastructure replacement funds, because you guys are going to have some of that coming up. Thirdly, I think that every historic city in the state of Oregon should get together if they have a state highway that goes through the middle of their town. And I think they should lobby ODOT and be the voice of livability and economic development. Why do I say that? Because right now, the group that is probably most active in lobbying the Oregon Department of Transportation is the freight lobby. And what do they care about? Wide lanes, driving through town without stopping. And there isn't really a cohesive voice that is offering an alternative viewpoint of the different things that the highways, the different needs that the highways serve. And part of being able to potentially two-way highway Marine Drive and have it be Highway 30 again is going to require some changes at ODOT. So I think you guys can tackle, based on your current situation in downtown, two-weighing most of the downtown, but the couplet isn't going to go away in the short term because of ODOT regulations. And so I think you need to get more involved in that with every other historic city that has a highway going through it in Oregon. The next thing I want to talk about is creating an identity for Marine Drive, and I think it should be different than the identity for commercial because they're very different streets. And it was kind of funny because I was going through my photos when I was first putting this presentation together, and I was looking at this photo and I was like, trees! I was so excited that there were trees, and it really looks nice, doesn't it, with just a few trees. And I started thinking about this approach. This is our approach, okay, to our downtown store. Okay, so we're in a rainforest next to a giant body of fresh water in the rainiest spot in Oregon. And this is what we see, right? Does that reflect that identity? No, it doesn't at all. And I think that's a part of your identity, and you're missing that. And it's funny because it's even winter, and you get up here to the front door, and you're just like, there's no leaves, but you're still like, oh, there's a tree. I'm so excited. So I think there's really opportunity to introduce more of an identity to Marine and create this sense that when you're in the downtown on Marine Drive, you're somewhere partly because of the lush greenery that you see there. And it doesn't all have to take the form of trees, and you can work on trees that don't block signs and don't grow to be huge and block view corridors. So there are lots of ways to incorporate green into Marine Drive, and I think that would really help to slow traffic down, make people pay attention, and it would make it much more enjoyable to walk on. So those are all things that I was thinking about in creating identity for Marine Drive. Then I was thinking about commercial, and it needs its own identity as well. It can't have street trees because of the hollow sidewalks. But you could do something, and these are just suggestions, but I think it needs its own identity. So I was thinking of all the sculptural trees that I've seen around. These are really interesting. There's this lower level landscaping, and they have these metal trees that come up. So these are all sculptures that imply the idea of trees, which you could totally run along commercial and have this amazing sculpture walk with this sense and this idea of trees. Or you could take this idea of the suggestion. So one of the things about a gateway, and I'm not suggesting this is St. Louis art, but is this, it creates a little room, right? It creates a ceiling. So there are ways to imply that idea of ceiling. This is a downtown in Denver, downtown Denver. It's a little district, and they have lights strung all the way across it. And so at night, it particularly creates a little bit of room, this little bit of a suggestion of creating this cozy, happy place. This was Mississippi Avenue, the tour we went. They have some colored canopies over the plaza, just to give a little bit of suggestion of an outdoor room. And this is an American artist who actually creates net sculptures that move in the wind. And she suspends them in the air. So there are all kinds of ways that you could play around with creating a little bit of a ceiling in downtown, and that could provide an environment where people are going to want to walk, they're going to slow down when they drive, and so it's going to be safer. And on a side note, I want to say that if you have to install flags in your street grid and your pedestrians have to, wave down the cars, then your grid is not properly designed. It's not telling the messages that the pedestrians are a priority and they need to slow down. Right? So flags aren't how we do it. This is the kind of stuff that we're talking about today that makes places safer. So we're going to move on to sidewalks now. And I'm just going to show a picture. That's pretty cool. I want to step through that picture. And if you look, it's completely blurred, this idea of where the businesses are and the buildings and the street. Everything is teeming with activity and excitement. It's pretty spectacular. So my recommendations are like this. So you want to make sure that it's free and legal and easy to put merchandise and tables on your sidewalks, okay? So you do not have a problem with too much activity on your sidewalks. And if you get to that point, you can figure it out then. But right now, make sure that from a regulatory basis, people can put merchandise on the sidewalks. That's good for business. You want to think about your sidewalks and how they look at key places, like your western front doors. You have a restaurant just on both sides of your front doors. So you have the Mexican restaurant, there's nobody sitting at these tables, but it's very appealing, right? It's sending this really important message. And then you have this restaurant, which, again, just having sort of a different set of tables out front would give this different message right when you come into town, because that's one of the first things you notice. And it just looks like it's kind of closed. On Marine Drive, where I would really focus on merchandising your sidewalks is your intersections, because those are the places where people have to stop. And when they have to stop on Marine Drive, they're actually looking around and saying, oh, what's going on here? So for instance, on 11th, you have a bike store. Bike stores are one of my favorite for merchandising sidewalks. So imagine if your bike store had all their bikes out front on the sidewalk on Marine like this. It would have a really big impact for everyone who stops at that traffic light. And then the last thing that I want to talk is the Riverwalk. So the question I want to ask is, how is anybody supposed to know it's there when they're driving by or when they're in downtown? There's no way to know that the Riverwalk is there. And I've spent a lot of time in Astoria over the decades, and I had no idea that the Riverwalk was there until I actually started doing work with your community. So I really think you need to think about a couple things. So some wayfinding signs, and I think you could mirror your little trolley station. So take that design, make it smaller, and do some fun wayfinding signs around pointing towards the trolley and the Riverwalk. I don't like plain signs. I like showing, not telling. So this shows and mirrors something that's on the Riverwalk. The other thing I think you should do is create some north-south connector streets to the Riverwalk that are really kind of designated and devoted to those. As we kind of talked about before, you have this whole east-west orientation to your grid. You need to start getting people thinking about how they travel north-south in your downtown. But I think throughout your city, you should have a couple of special spots, these sort of Riverwalk corridors where people would go and are aware of the Riverwalk, and it connects north-south. So just as an example, I might pick 14th Street for that. It has some hotels. It's got a collection of small businesses. It has a good visual corridor to the river. And so what would I do? So on the corner of Commercial and 14th, what I might have is a bronze statue of like a pointer pointing down towards the Riverwalk. And maybe the title of it is, Sam wants to go for a walk on the Riverwalk. So that would be a way to do that. And then on the empty faces of buildings going down to the Riverwalk, maybe you have art displays where local artists can express what the Riverwalk means to them through art, through photos, through drawings. And those things can change over time so people can come and look at those. And then when you get to Marine Drive, there can be a different sidewalk treatment there that really says this is somewhere special. And as you're driving along and you see these besprinkled around, you're going to say, well, what is that? What does that signify? What does that mean? That would be a way of creating a north-south Riverwalk connector. So that is a quick overview of aisles. So that means we have 2 down and 2 to go in your store, to use a baseball term. We only have fixtures and products left, and they're pretty related. Fixtures are the things that cradle and display and house and show off your products. In a downtown, your fixtures are your buildings, and your products are your businesses. So great fixtures make products look great, right? So great buildings make businesses look great, and great. So a fantastic building in your downtown store can uplift really almost any business. And a horrible building in your downtown store can sink almost any business. So these are actually the same buildings. And these are in downtown Oregon City. And these were just renovated by the Bush furniture family. So again, very different atmosphere provided by these fixtures in the downtown. So I created a map to talk about fixtures that I'm going to use from here on out. And I call this the ground floor activation map. And I made this for Astoria to really look at fixtures and products and see how they're related. So I start by looking just at what's going on in the ground floor of a town, because that is where we take the identity of a district. So let's talk about how I color-coded this. Only 3 things I'm looking for. Activity, that's blue. Inactivity, or inward-facing, that's red. And vacant is green. So this is just a snapshot of your buildings, your fixtures in your downtown, and which ones have products that are outward-facing and which ones don't. Now, before we dive into this map, because people always come back to me later and say, like, I think this square should be red, there is a judgment call on these. What I generally think is that a business that is open to the public, active, engaging, encouraging exploration and interaction at the street level, okay, that is an active blue business. So, can you guess what this business is? You're never going to guess. This is a trick question. It's a yoga studio. Now, I don't usually categorize yoga studios as active businesses because they usually aren't, but this one is. So anything can really be an active business or an inactive business. But those are kind of the judgment calls that I try to make. So in a store, we don't want shelves without products, right? So we don't want an area where we've got products on shelves and then an area with no products on shelves. That is an unsuccessful store. We want a continuous environment of merchandise to interact with. So we have to have a continuous group of fixtures to display those products. And if we look at this map, what's really interesting is where is your best collection of outward-facing businesses that has the strongest sense of identity in the downtown, right? It's where you have the best collection of fixtures, of buildings built right next to each other in a continuous fashion right up to the sidewalk. So that's not a surprise. So just like a successful store, you need things to put your products on that are right next to each other without blanks. I want to go back to that. So that's the strong part of downtown. So I want to go back to this slide about where people avoided, because the Favela block was number 1. So this isn't a very good fixture. We have a very strong and powerful reaction to empty shelves, to empty rundown shelves in a store, and that's kind of what these buildings are acting like. So what can we do about our fixtures? The first thing is matching grant storefront programs. I know this isn't a sexy or original recommendation, but these programs really work, and if you don't have them, you should. The more you can upgrade your buildings, the better all the businesses are going to do that are in them. Where do you focus a program like that? You focus it where you have the most strength and activity and identity right now, and then you build from the edges. So you want to leverage your dollars most effectively. And you want to focus on historic infrastructure. So from that workshop, we asked people to give words that describe Astoria as a whole. And as you can see, this connection, other than beer, with the history was really huge. The historic buildings, its unique place in the history of the Western United States, everyone really connects with the history of the city. So that's another place you would want to focus those resources for sure. But in the absence of that, or if you're a building owner, what do you start tackling? You don't have to do everything at once. You don't have to do a $50,000 renovation of your building to make it look better. And we're going to travel back in time and look at an example that I used in my first presentation. So the first thing you can do is remove awnings. So with awnings, form follows function. If you're not using this awning to put a lot of outdoor products and outdoor tables, then it is actually detracting from your business because it makes it hard to see inside, and it makes it hard to interact with the building and tell the physical story of this great place. You want to introduce 3-color paint schemes, as I've said multiple times. If it's bright and vibrant and exciting in terms of color, it feels vibrant and bright and exciting to be near it. And then you want to make your buildings look fantastic at night. Right? That's really important. The way we decide if a district is open for business or if it's safe at night really has more to do with building and storefront lighting than it has to do with street lighting, which is really just designed for the cars, not for people who are strolling around the district after dark. So you really have to think about how do your buildings look at night. So in driving around downtown Astoria in the dark, one of the things I do in a town is I just look, is there something that jumps out at me that I only notice at night, that I've never noticed at any other time? And there were 2 things. The first was this vault at the bank. I actually hit the brakes in reverse. I was like, what was that? And I think I've walked by this 1,000 times in the day. I never noticed it. But at night, I noticed it. It's a great example of something that's kind of cool. At night, there are all kinds of things you can do to make your district cool at night, even if you're closed. The other one was the Wells Fargo building. So it's actually lit. It's one of your few buildings on commercial that have building lighting. And the play of light and shadow on the vertical elements on the windows was actually really interesting from different perspectives. On a side note, this building could be so spectacular if it was painted and could really contribute to the downtown in a fantastic way. But that's a side note. So I want you guys to think about how to really activate your district at night. So that is an overview of fixtures. So we're going to move on now to the last one, which is products. When we're inside a store, the experience that is provided to us as visitors is driven largely by the products that are for sale and how they're merchandised. If there's a great selection of products and they're engagingly displayed and they're nicely lit and they're laid out in an environment that we like to be in or that's appropriate for the type of product, then we're going to have a pretty good time in that store and we're going to feel pretty good about that store. And downtowns are no different. Downtown Astoria takes its identity from its ground floor businesses. And when we did the workshop, the ones that people listed as being beloved and leading businesses were those that were local, active, on the ground floor, and really outward facing. So the blue ones that are on this map. So what are the things that you need to do to improve downtown's products, which are these ground floor businesses that we're talking about? So we're going to talk about kind of a little retail 101 for your ground floor products. And you really want to think, again, about how you reinforce the strengths in the area that are already strong. So the first thing is you need to deliver a great retail experience. And it's like, well, thank you, Michelle. That's really helpful. What does that mean? So let's talk about that a little bit more. Number one, and I've listed it in lots of different ways, engage the sidewalk 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, whether you're open or closed, period. Secondly, you really want to think about right-sizing your spaces. So you have a lot of businesses that are in way too much space. So for instance, these are 500 square foot micro restaurant concepts that are doing really well. So typically in a downtown, we want kind of a more intimate retail experience. than you would get in a big box store. So we want something that's maybe 1,000 or 1,500 square feet, sometimes a little bigger, depends on the use, but generally a more intimate experience. So you have a lot of fantastic businesses in your downtown, but there are a lot of them that I could literally just take half of the merchandise, move it into half the building, and you could lease out the other half, and it would probably be much more successful. So a lot of your businesses are in space that is too big. So I want to talk to you about a story of this, and this is from downtown Gresham. So this is a space that's about 1,500 to 2,000 square feet, and it was a vitamin supplement store, and 1,500 to 2,000 square feet is way too big for that, and it was struggling. So the owner of this building went through a process similar to the one that we're doing here today, and he decided that something else needed to be in here. This needed to be right size, and the person who owned this couldn't move it. So he bought the business, and he moved them to a right size space. And he sold it for more than he bought it for because it was doing better in the right size space. So what did he put in this space? He put in a hamburger joint that is really active at lunch and at dinner. He took the space and he shelled it out doing the things that I talked about. The floor is concrete, so he just left it concrete and he polished it. He exposed some of the features, the brick or the 20s era clay brick that you see here. Nothing fancy about this, but it's giving the experience that people want to see in a downtown. This courtyard that's between the restaurant and the business next to it has never been activated in the over decade that he's owned this building. Now it is hopping definitely around lunch and dinner every day. And this bottle shop and also specialty brews on tap is on the other side of the courtyard, and they collaborate, and you can share products across this courtyard. So it's created this whole hive of activity in this place that was really a dead spot before. And I want to make a little note about this because I think there was some feedback from one of my presentations about I can't put like a huge wood floor in my space. It would be really expensive, and I don't think I would get the benefit from that. And I agree with that. What I'm saying is you want your spaces, what people expect from a downtown environment is not carpet. They don't expect a suburban big box kind of feel. They want to see the original features of the building. So if you have a fir floor subfloor in your old building, then finish that and make that your floor. If you have concrete in your building, rip up the carpet and polish it. So what I'm saying is get rid of the carpet is what I'm saying. So I'm going to give you an example of this. This is the restaurant he just did after the work that we did, and it's been incredibly successful. This is the first restaurant he put in right next door in that space. So I want you to look at the different experience that those are giving. This is not what people expect from a downtown experience, and it's not leveraging the environment and your historic infrastructure really successfully. The next thing that I want to talk about is retail is about reinvention. Restaurants have to change their menus. We have to adjust to changing buying habits because people are doing a lot on the internet now. We have to offer customers something new all the time. I thought this stat was really, really interesting here, where Generation Y moms were saying that staying with a brand for 6 months to a year was like a long-term commitment and represented brand loyalty. So things are really changing, and it's important that every business stay on top of how they can be relevant and offer a new experience to their customers. And that really leads into leveraging local strengths. What do you have as strengths when you're local? Well, one is you can carry specialty merchandise. The other is that you can offer personal service. The third is that you can offer knowledge and expertise that minimum wage employees at a big box store cannot. And you offer community fabric. This is one of the most important things that you can offer in a downtown, and something the retailers need to work on building more together. The next thing I want to talk about is that retail is a multi-sensory experience. So for your ground floor products, they really need to be engaging across all the senses, and it's really interesting. So our brains are regulated to make decisions with emotion, because without emotion, we're incapable of categorizing our choices and how we feel about them. And the more senses that you engage with somebody, the more engaged hold on, I got that backwards. So the more ways that we involve people's sentences, the more emotionally attached they become to whatever it is that is engaging all of those senses. So if you want to make a lasting impression with your products, you want to engage everybody's senses. Smells, sounds, tastes, and touches, all of these things matter a lot in a retail environment. So I'm going to give you an example. Does anybody know what this is? It's a hotel. It's in downtown Tacoma, and before you even get into the lobby, this is out on the sidewalk, you can sit in one of those couches and feel the sun and the wind. They pipe music in from outside, so it's got this little ambiance, and they have that fire going 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, all year long. You can feel it on your hands, and you can hear it flickering, and then they have these big glass installations, and so you can look at those and enjoy those. So they're creating a multi-sensory experience before you even walk in their hotel, and it's really having a big impact. I'm going to give you another example. This is from downtown Gresham. This is by the same guy that owns those other stores. This is a new store that he put in. It's a very small candy shop, and the size of the space is what you see here. And what's amazing about this space is when it's slow, they open up their doors, and the smell of specialty popcorn popping wafts out the doors, and you start salivating. And they walk around with little sample trays all around downtown, and then you taste their wares. And then how do you feel about this store? Right? You love it, and you feel this tremendous connection to it. So retail is a sensory experience. You have to engage the senses. Lighting is not only important on the exterior. Does anybody know what this is? Grocery store. It's actually a Safeway. Yeah, it kind of looks a little upmarket for a Safeway. And part of the reason, the way that they do that is they have a different floor and they have drop lighting. So they're creating a room, a special room with their drop lighting. So finding ways to creatively using lighting in your stores to create those rooms and that experience is something that I'd like to see more of in downtown. And the last thing I want to talk about is show, don't tell. I hate signs. We depend on signs way too much. They're a crutch. Nobody is visiting your business because of your A-frame sign. They might actually not be visiting your business because of your A-frame sign, but it's not why they're visiting your business. So what I recommend for people to do is to say, I want you to pretend that you can't have a sign on your building or an A-frame sign. And I want you to think about all the ways you can communicate who you are, what you're about, what experience you're going to provide, what your products are, and what your customer service is going to be like. How do you express all of those things without a sign? And once you do all that, then you can figure out the right sign that fits in with your business. And that's how you really want to approach your products on the ground floor of your business. The last thing I want to touch on with products is, what do you do when you have empty shelves, right? Which is empty buildings. You have to find products to put in there. What products do you want to put in there? I think this is a really important niche that you really need to think about keeping in downtown Astoria. Downtown Astoria's identity is very much focused and has this industrial working river town feel. And so you want to find ways to bring in light industrial uses that have sort of the showroom need. So Fort George is a great example. They're manufacturing beer, but they have events and brew pub and other things. They have this outward-facing piece to it. The Rebuilding Center, you might recognize some people in this photo, is another example. This is a used building supply warehouse on a retail street, but it's very successful. These are the kinds of businesses that would work really well in Astoria. This is Queen Bee Handbags, and they manufacture handbags on a retail commercial district. And just looking right in the window, you can see where they are making all the handbags, and they have a cute little showroom in the corner. So I think you guys definitely need to look for more of those kinds of uses in your empty buildings downtown. And that brings us to the end of kind of the exploration of your downtown store. And that means that we only have 2 things left to go, and I assure you they're not equally as long. So that was our big, long section. So we're going to talk about strategies for telling downtown story and policy for downtown. I'm going to focus on just one thing for policy. So for telling downtown's story, the store metaphor still works. So if you have a store, the different departments have autonomy to kind of do their thing, but if they don't all cooperate and collaborate together to tell a cohesive story about the whole store, it's not going to work very well, and that's very true for your downtown. So I want to talk about some of the ways you can think about how you tell downtown story more effectively, the story of this single store. And I want to start by talking about adjacencies, and that is determining what products should be placed next to each other to create excitement and encourage exploration and circulation and sales in a store. So the woman who owns this store, which is Flutter in Portland, is one of my favorite retailers. She's a serial entrepreneur. And she once told me about her store. She said, Michelle, if people walk around the store once and leave, I know I have to move my products around because they should never feel like they can come in my store and do one lap and see everything. Right? So that is what we're trying to create in downtown. It's connecting all your businesses so customers feel excited and encouraged to explore. And one trip is never enough to see everything in your downtown. And a good place to start is by leveraging this idea of adjacencies. What products work well together? So there are different types of adjacencies. I'm going to cover 3 here. One is emotional adjacencies. Those are businesses that naturally kind of have an affinity for each other and could work with co-marketing. I'm going to give you an example from Downtown Tiger. They have a wedding consultant. they have a jewelry store, and they have the largest ballroom dance floor in the West Coast. Those three businesses should be collaborating. They have emotional adjacencies. So you want to be exploring those in your downtown. Physical adjacencies. These are businesses that are next to each other. How can they help each other? Everyone should be thinking that way. So if you have a restaurant next to a beauty salon, the restaurant could provide little hors d'oeuvres once in a while, courtesy of, to make people, exposed to their products that are in the beauty salon. And the beauty salon could contribute some nice, yummy smelling soaps for the restroom at the restaurant. And you could buy the soaps when you get out if you actually liked it. So those are examples of how unlikely businesses could work together to create adjacencies because they happen to be next to each other. The other thing I like to look at is in your store, what are your best-selling products? I'm going to use the example of museums because you have some really fantastic museums in your downtown. So we've got the Flavel House, we've got the Film Museum, we have the Historic Society, and we have the Maritime Museum. But I want you to think what is around all of these museums. Every one of your best-selling products is surrounded by inward-facing uses in parking lots. So that's kind of like taking the milk in a grocery store and putting it behind a giant wall, right? That's your best-selling product, but we're going to just put it where it's not interconnected with anything else. So you have to figure out how to interconnect some of your best-selling products. What about one of these fun group bikes? And in the summer, you had a museum bike tour that people would start at the Maritime Museum and then go around to the 4 other museums, and this would be a wandering advertisement for this idea that it's a great place to visit museums. Another thing is reaching out to people who are and aren't relating. I'm going to focus on are relating. From our work, or aren't relating, the workshop that we did that Susan referenced, we asked the question, who is not relating to downtown right now? And this was the list that came up. So kids and teens, locals, Latinos, and seniors and professionals. So let's kind of talk about them one by one. How can we create more connection to them with our downtown store? Teens are hard. I have one teen and one who's going to be one soon. And I actually even asked them this question, which annoyed them. I don't know, Mom. But one of the things that I was thinking about is when we used to do the Mississippi Street Fair, we used to take a parking lot and we would put in a big skateboard ramp. So maybe on a few of your Sunday markets in the summer, you could put a big skateboard ramp and some programming for teenagers as a part of that somewhere in your downtown. For kids, a little bit easier, this Brew Pub and Tigard installed some Connect and some Wii to use for free for families and to encourage people to come in. It was really successful. Teenagers also like ice cream, so I just like a small ice cream shop if I'm trying to attract kids. And arts and culture is a real place. So you have a drama club at the high school. What about having them do some small one-act dinner theater plays in some of your restaurants? So that would be a way to connect teenagers with what's going on downtown. Let's look at another group, locals. Sherry touched on this a little bit. You know, Astoria's identity, I can't tell you how much I've just anecdotally heard this from anybody who hears I'm working in Astoria. They love it that they go to a restaurant in downtown and they sit by somebody who's from downtown. And they always tell me, like, yeah, you know, I was sitting in that restaurant and the woman who owns the Silver Salmon, she was like right next to me. I could hear her conversation. So that is unusual on the coast. And that is one of the things that's special about Astoria is they are participating in the fabric of your community. And they really want to be a part of that. So if locals aren't relating to your downtown, that's a problem. And it's a problem that you need to fix. And it's not just about hours, because if they've sort of fallen out of in love with you, you need to think about how do you get them to fall back in love with you. Then you can deal with hours. So some things to think about. Locals don't like tourists. That's a fact of life. So in the summer, if you want to get them downtown, offer them a locals discount at your restaurants. That would be something that you could do. Another thing you can do in the winter is smaller store-based events. Like you could have a rotating ladies' night out. This picture was taken from a really small store last Christmas that's a vintage store, and they had a little fashion show, and it was fantastic, and it was so popular they had to do 2 of them. And these are not professional models and just wearing clothes from the store, and it was really, really fun. So there are a variety of things that you can do on a smaller basis that's really relevant to locals and will make downtown more beloved. Latinos, why not reach out to the leaders in the greater Latino community? Close off one of your streets during the market or some other time. Have salsa lessons, a salsa band, salsa dancing. Mexican food. That would be really fantastic and a way to start integrating the Latino community a little bit more into downtown. And then seniors and professionals, one of the things that I was thinking that this group, I hear a lot, the seniors on the Hill don't get involved with downtown and the professionals don't necessarily interact with downtown. So what about having a little downtown delivery service just for those people where you could shop in downtown or do stuff, and at the end of the day it all got collected up and delivered just to those downtown stakeholders and makes them feel special. And this is a 1900 delivery truck, which I just love because it's a little more than a bicycle, but I love that it was a delivery truck. So that would be an example of how to maybe forge some connections for your store with these groups who are not relating. And that leads me to my last thing. I'm on my last one. Policy for downtown. So I have a ton of things to talk about with policies for downtown, but people wanted me to talk about parking, right? So in talking about parking, that means I don't have time to talk about any other policy for downtown, but I'm going to be kind of quick here. So parking is always a hot-button issue for every town, and I want to give you a few things to think about here related to parking. Does anybody know what this map is? Okay, so I took that ground floor activation map and I turned it all back to white again. And what I did was map just your off-street parking spaces in your downtown. Are you surprised? Right. So all everybody says to me is, we don't have any parking. Right. And so this was really interesting to finish this map because I was like, wow, they have a lot of parking. So in this metaphor of a store, what is this parking kind of like? It's like this, right? It's like where we store our carts. So can you imagine if Fred Meyer put little cart storage places like this everywhere in their store? How would that store feel? Not really great. I want you to notice something else about this map. Where are your strongest areas in terms of identity and outward-facing uses in businesses? Right, that's kind of interesting, isn't it? Right? So our strongest areas were the areas without the least amount of black spots. So that's something, that's the irony of parking. I also wanted to note something really particular to Astoria, and it was just bugging me for the longest time. I've been working here for months, and I'm like, there's something about the atmosphere, the ambiance, that's really getting to me, but I can't put my finger on it, and I finally did, and it's what I call pit parking. So because you're an elevated city, when a building is taken down, you have this permanent wound that goes below the street level. So it's like a tooth that has been pulled, and the gum never grows back over it. And it leaves Astoria with these wounds that are surrounded by metal fencing and chain link fencing. And it's having this huge impact. It almost feels like it's been bombed on the ambience of downtown, beyond just the normal detraction that a flat lot parking lot is. And I paused here because there's a particular Dresden-like feel to Marine Drive. Because Marine Drive, we have all this pit parking and the back of commercial, right? So look at this. I mean, this is really remarkable. And it goes on, okay? So there's a lot of pit parking in your downtown. I had to throw that one in. Nobody's parking there right now. There could be a car under there, though. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. So I wanted you to keep those couple of things in mind as we move forward with this idea of just talking about parking. So the first thing that I want to say is I think it's really essential that you sit down as a community and you create a parking plan for your entire store. Okay? You can't create a plan for one street or one area. It's a store, so you have to create a plan for your whole store. You need to keep in mind a couple of key things. Parking is a limited resource in a downtown. Okay? Everyone benefits if parking is managed holistically. The better downtown does, the better every property owner does, the better every business does. You guys are all in this together as a single store. And you want to really, as a part of this process, you want to prioritize who is going to benefit from different kinds of parking. You have to think about that and agree to it as a group. So your goal, most communities prioritize having a vital mixed-use district. That's not crazy, prioritization. So that means that customers or visitors are the parking priority. And if that's the case, if customers and visitors are the parking priority, what that means is you want to have, at all times, one empty on-street parking space on every block. That's roughly what that means. So that means anybody who drives up is going to be able to park and partake of your business. So that's your goal. That's what you want to manage these parking resources to holistically. So in approaching this idea of creating a community parking plan, the first thing you have to do is gather data. So you have to look at what your peak parking is. So over several hours of a day, what's your peak parking period? You have to look at how many on-street spaces you have and how many off-street spaces you have. And you have to look at your public parking facilities and your private parking facilities. You have to look at all of your parking infrastructure and get data. You cannot make any good decisions about parking in your store until you have data, period. Then, once you have that data, you really want to think about how you can leverage and share your private and public parking, your on-street and your off-street parking, in order to prioritize the benefits to customers and to get employee and professional parking where they need to be and where they feel comfortable and that they're being served. And there are a variety of ways to kind of tackle that. Another thing to do is find a way to use some of your off-street spaces to facilitate the customers who need a longer stay in your downtown. You do not want to do that in your on-street spaces, but there is a need to do that, and you want to do that in your off-street spaces. So there are some rules of thumb. Well, actually, I wanted to pause really quickly because there's something that people don't realize about parking. And that is that some communities have used parking meters to fund revitalization efforts. So Old Pasadena is an example. The Lloyd District in Portland, they don't even have 85% parking, but they still put parking meters in, and they use the revenues from those parking meters to improve the environment, to fund things like storefront improvement and streetscape improvement and nice landscaping. So you can actually create a parking benefit district and use the revenue generated from the meters to further improve the environment. So that's just something I wanted people to think about. So there are some parking rules of thumb that I wanted to share with you. The first is that parking consultants, when you talk to them about parking pass programs, every community has had some version of a parking pass program, and they generally create problems. But here's some rules of thumb about them. The first is that they don't tend to work if there isn't a fee associated with them that's high enough to discourage abuse. And second, they need to be used for off-street spaces. So if our goal is to make sure that there's one free space on the street on every block, you just cannot take those spaces up with people who are going to be there longer than whatever your prescribed time limit is. But it's okay to figure out a way to get access for people who want to be in the district longer. You just want to keep them in off-street spaces. The other thing about parking is that you drive people's behavior with pricing. So I know you've raised the rates for your parking ticket in Astoria because a lot of employees and employers were just seeing that as their parking fee. So they'd park on the street and then pay the cheap ticket. So part of the way you manage pricing or parking is how you price both parking itself and or the ramifications of cheating. And then the third thing is every community that is successful at creating a great place figures out how to share all of their parking resources to the benefit of the entire store. So those are some things that I want you guys to think about when it comes to parking. So my thought on your parking situation now, because I know there was a parking pass issue that came up recently, is that you cannot attack parking in this piecemeal fashion as if you're not one giant store. So I would not change anything about your parking policy right now, and instead I would step back and I would think about your entire downtown store, and I would work together as a community to really optimize your parking to meet all of your goals in this really data-backed sort of way that I've described here today. So that's it. That's all the policy stuff that I'm going to talk about, and that's kind of the conclusion of the meat of what I'm going to say today. I have two quick closing remarks. The first is there's a report that goes along with this, and believe it or not, what I talked about here today is probably about half of what's in the report. But I didn't want to keep you for 4 hours. So you're going to have to read it. It's actually going to be out around April 15th. So the ADHDA it's going to be available for download, and they'll let you know about how you can get your hands on that. And second, I just wanted to leave everybody with that idea again. And I know I reuse this picture a lot, but I just love it. Revitalization always comes from relationships. And I know I've said that before, but I just want to stress it again. It comes from relationships between people, relationships between organizations, relationships between the public and the private sector. You can't get away from that. You guys here in Astoria are incredibly lucky, as Sherry referenced, because you have an incredibly focused, talented, committed, dedicated, knowledgeable, passionate community here. And it has been my absolute pleasure. I'm going to miss coming to Astoria all the time and talking, and talking to you guys. Yeah, my husband isn't going to appreciate it. I'm just like, yeah, I'm going to Astoria. But rest assured, I have all these things I want to come and do with my kids and come here. But it's been just a true pleasure to work here with you all. And I cannot tell you how touched I've been to really be accepted into your community and how delightful it has been to collaborate with all of you. And I want to just say one last thing, that I think that the NBAs in Astoria, the native-born Astorians, and the ABCs in Astoria, the Astorians by choice, I think together you guys are really going to take downtown to the next level. Thank you.